Naka, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, thank you so kindly for gracing us with your presence today. I will ride on the wave that has been ridden on before me today in acknowledging all of you, and will not go into the details of that again. I have a number of apologies to make. For those of us who went to school in Fiji, we have, for many of us who have been here for years in our younger days, some of us may not have apologized for not being good students or not being good young people in our time at Suba. So apologies for that. But I am also very happy to be here. I am honored to be here with you in this esteemed gathering. A gathering of people who are dignified, a gathering that represents time and generations and all that is dear to us who are here in the present. I apologize that in my recounting of this imaginative, creative story, I might use names that are yours, in that they are who you are called by. They are not. I'm not talking about you if you are one of those who are named in this story. In fact, I could be talking about any one of us from my understanding of leadership. So I apologize in advance if the name that I use is one that you associate with. I have retitled my talk today by calling it Everyday Pacific Leadership. Sarah, her paddle, and questions. In my East Malaita language, a short story, this kind of short story is called a saifua. And in a saifua, which is used very much in the shaping and reshaping of character, that's its intention. And as a pedagogy, it's very effective in shaping and reshaping of character. Because it's short and sweet, it's not a long story. It's supposed to be a short story. But in recounting the story, someone who sees the need for shaping and reshaping of character would stop and would throw out teaching moments or teaching points intentionally. We may not do that because of time, but I've built in questions in there as well. And hopefully if this story is in published form, then you will see some of the questions. But the questions are not meant there for us to answer right now. The questions are meant in the story, as well as other questions that I will engage with the questions that are asked in the story are meant there just for our thinking through, just for our reflection. And so this is, hopefully, from my perspective and understanding of leadership, my story and your story as well. Sarah picked up her paddle and walked back to the beach as the sun was setting. The flotilla of Wanga, or Waka, or Vaka, that she was a part of had earlier landed on an island, ending the first leg of their Pacific Ocean voyaging. The journey so far has not been easy. As she cleared the scrub, Sarah's eyes met with the vast and open Pacific sky. She looked into the horizon, still feeling the salty spray on her face. She rolled her tongue, tasting dried salt on her cracked lips. Sarah asked, "When will this arduous and back-aching journey end? Will there be calmer waters tomorrow? What kind of world awaits my family and my generation? On what or whom can we set our hope for tomorrow's uncertainties?" It may well be that those questions are ones that we as leaders are also wrestling with. And so I further ask, what questions are you asking today as a leader? What questions are you posing in the moments when you cannot sleep, in the moments when you are intensely reflecting on your world? Sarah felt so alone on that deserted beach. The questions she posed were hers alone to answer. No one else seemed to have asked such pressing questions. Sarah was a mute, a mere 8-year-old who had taken the journey, observed all that was going on around her, but not a participant as the adults and other able children were. As Sarah was pondering her own questions, she was suddenly conscious of the paddle in her hand. Since she left the camp, Sarah had been unconsciously dragging her paddle along as she was walking. Suddenly, she recalled her grandmother's story about the paddle. In grandmother's account, the paddle was asked why it was not tired of paddling day in and day out, year in and year out. And the paddle replied, according to grandma's story, "I am a paddle. My ancestors walked on water. I am created to be a paddle, to do what a paddle is made for." The paddle's confident response assured Sarah. As she reflected on Grandma's story, Sarah's own earlier questions did not seem as overwhelming as she first thought. Her grandmother's testimony has indeed grounded Sarah well at that moment. And so I pose further questions for our reflection. How confident are you as a leader, as the paddle of its Creator's purpose for it? Or as a leader, does your life testimony establish and steady your children or your grandchildren? Or does your testimony have a disruptive impact on your family, on your clan, on your organization, or in your country? Back to the story. Suddenly Sarah was beside the flotilla of Wanga on the beach. She approached the Wanga, which was captained by her own father. As the cultured young girl that Sarah was, she approached the dry-docked Wanga from the astern facing the bow, holding on to the side of the canoe. Sarah walked up beside the boat, marveling at the number of seats in the canoe. In her mind, Sarah tried to recall who was occupying each seat. Indeed, there were men, women, girls and boys. There were grandmothers and grandfathers. There were uncles and aunties. On their last stop, Sarah recalled that their canoe had actually picked up 3 additional passengers from another island, and 2 of them brought their own paddles with them. As Sarah walked her way up the canoe, feeling her hands on the side of the canoe, she could clearly imagine the different paddlers occupying those seats. And even with her young mind, Sarah could tell that the different paddlers had different roles to play. They had multiple abilities and varying performance records. Her active mind asked, to what extent are the members of my father's wanga, or indeed the entire flotilla, seeing themselves as a community? To what extent is each paddler playing their roles and doing so in tandem with the others? How well are the weaker ones supported, and or the young paddlers mentored? And for further reflection, I pose these questions. What is your leadership capacity for ethically dealing with difference and complexity in your world, and for negotiating the critical, creative, and colorful tensions and opportunities that come with complexity in today's world? Back to the story. Even her young mind was disturbed by the answers to her own questions. As Sarah reflected on her questions, she could tell that not all travelers had the interest of the group at heart. Her mind went back to Uncle Sione 2 days previously. While strong, healthy, and an able seaman, Uncle Sione was not applying himself as a paddler. And then there was Sarah's older brother, Simi, who would often deliberately raise his paddle. Okay, those of you who are familiar with paddling in a big wanga, in rough seas, when the waves are coming this way, instead of rhythmically going with the current or on the wave, you could slightly hit it like that, and the ones at the back will get spray on their face. So, and there was Simi, who would often deliberately raise his paddle just above the water to catch the oncoming wave. In this way, the passengers immediately behind Simi would have seawater splashing right onto their faces. Questions for reflection. How well do you deal with the likes of Sione or Simi in your family, in your organization, or in your community? How do you wisely deal with members who are not applying themselves well or fully, or who are divisive, or whose tendencies, might I say, whose humanistic tendencies and humanistic influences are disrupting community morality or familiar cohesion? Back to the story, Sarah noted, indeed, theirs is a familial community. But she asked, to what extent is the traveling troupe a community of mind, a community of heart? She asked herself, to what extent is her community one of practice? actually living out what they believed, as opposed to just say it? To what extent do the members of her Wanga and the entire flotilla, true to their own animation, they're living out of the principles of leadership that they say are ours or are theirs? As she was thinking about those questions, her active mind actually bothered her. But yet she continued asking herself, as we are resting now on this island and preparing for the next leg of our journey, how might we enhance our community? How might we engage all our members so that no individual or no ability is sidelined and no potential is left untapped or wasted? For Sarah, there were no clear or satisfactory answers to her own questions. Those very same questions lingered disturbingly in her perceptive mind. And for further reflections, I ask, how tolerant is your leadership capacity for the tough unanswered questions of life that you may be facing now? How well do you deal with uncertainties or contradictions of leadership, particularly those not of your own making or not of your own community's making? As Sarah made her way further towards the front of the Wanga, her hands felt the seat of her grandmother. Sarah's mind raced to yesterday's stormy encounter at sea. The entire flotilla was in danger. The waves were breaking uncontrollably into the canoes. In their own Wanga, Grandma had stopped paddling at one point and instead was furiously bailing water out. Sarah's brother and uncle were all paddling. Even Sarah herself was helping to bail out water. As she recalled all the actions of the stormy encounter, a smile broke out from Sarah's dry lips, partially exposing her white, healthy teeth. Pleasingly, Sarah noted how well the journeying community was working together. During yesterday's storm, they were actually working concurrently. In their different roles, all hands were on deck, working in support of and in alignment with each other. With a smile on her face and still deep in thought, Sarah imagined what the future held in store. She asked herself, to what extent will our community create environments for concurrent animation of people's abilities, of their many giftings, and of their many passions? In what ways might our community encourage personal agency to flourish, and to do so in alignment with the greater good for all? On the desolate beach, Sarah's attention was drawn to the neatly and beautifully arranged seats in her father's Wanga. Her active mind went back to the previous week when the sea was calm and the travelers' moods were high. It was early one morning and the paddlers were fresh. All hands were on deck doing ceremonial paddling. In her island culture, ceremonial paddling was reserved for certain occasions only. On that morning, the entire crew was united in their responses. Sarah relived the occasion in her imagination. Her commander or captain seafarer father's voice rang loud and clear. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. On my island, the captain would call 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and everybody would do that. That's ceremonial paddling, and there are different ways of doing it. Closing her eyes, Sarah imagined herself submerged in the water and looking at the paddles from beneath the canoe. Oh, what collaboration! Sarah thought to herself, how beautiful the paddles look when they are working together. Lost in thought and in sync with the beauty of unified paddles at work, Sarah recalled, I am a paddle. My ancestors walked on water. I am created to be a paddle, to do what a paddle is made for. For reflection, when was the last time you have stopped in order to enjoy a moment of wonder, even in the midst of the grind and routine of life? Who of your leaders is showing beauty in their purpose-filled lives through their alignment of passion with their calling? Sarah thought more deeply. Indeed, working together assumed that no one was more able or gifted or knowledgeable than the others. Working together was based on the sum total of our combined efforts as more valuable than our contributing parts. She deduced that collaboration required humility to ask for assistance, to appear dependent, and to seek help. She resolved that working together was a sign of confidence, sign of trust, and commitment to the common good. But even with that resolution, Sarah was still unsure. She posed more questions to herself. To what extent is my community humble or confident enough to work together? Especially in times of difficulty and in needful circumstances, to what extent have we made working together habitual, such that it has become our lifestyle in our organization, in our village, in our family? With a deeply agonizing heart, Sarah continued, especially in times when key members are tired or have had enough of this long journey that is life, or are now susceptible to making errors, making mistakes, or are now showing unclear visions. How mature is our leadership so that we can still work together in collaboration with and of service to each other as well as to others? The sun was about to set. As Sarah raised her head at the towering prow of the Wanga, she was quickly lost in her thoughts. Her active mind wandered back to earlier that day. The flotilla of Wanga had been traveling in rough seas for the past 2 days and a night. While a seasoned traveler, Sarah's grandmother seemed unwell. Sarah could see this in her grandmother's eyes. Everyone was quiet. There was no more singing, no more ceremonial paddling. As Sarah looked at her grandmother, Sarah's heart bled for her beloved one. As much as she wanted to, Sarah could not appeal to her father, as he was too far up the front of the canoe. Oh, how she longed to tug at her father's caring heart. Oh, how she wished her father could just look back, could glance back. Sarah knew that her father would do anything to help his own sick mother if he knew the plight of her aged mother at that time. At that very moment, someone alerted the Wanga captain about his sick mother. And right away he acted. Elated about her father's decision, Sarah's inquisitive mind asked, "To what extent is mine a community of heart? To what extent are our hearts bled by the not so good things that we see and experience in our day, in our time?" Even for a young mind, Sarah knew that as a community, a Wanga party is made up of people. And as such, loyalty, love, compassion are essentials of any community, especially in times when the going is tough. For reflection as leaders, how well are we attending to our hearts and to matters of the heart? Back at the camp, the sun had set. It was night and Sarah was dozing off to sleep. As she did so, Sarah dreamt. In her dream, she was reliving a stormy part of the ocean journey so far. The raging sea was dumping water into the canoe. Sarah was thrown overboard. She was gasping for air as she began sinking. As she struggled, her two arms were kicking, and the dreaming Sarah saw the tip of a paddle racing past his nose. As the paddle was being used, the tip of the paddle was just going past her nose, and she was in the water. The paddle racing past her nose, as if the paddle was freeing itself from the grip of the sea. And Sarah's raging mind remembered, "I am a paddle. My ancestors walked on water. I am created to be a paddle, to do what a paddle is made for." Silence. Sarah fell into a deep sleep. For reflection, have you recently had, or are you having a leadership nightmare right now? In times when you might be having a nightmare, a leadership one, and in times when you might be tormented by such nightmares, where do you get your comfort? Where do you get your help from? Sarah could feel the warm and bright rays of the sun on her salty face. She could feel her paddle in her gripping fingers. Sarah opened her eyes to see that her skipper father gathering all the paddles to resume the journey. Sarah's father seemed upbeat. Rest had given the seasoned seafarer renewed energy. A new day seemed to have brought newer promises. At the sight of her father, Sarah felt assured. She was ready for the new day and the journey ahead. For reflection, to what extent is your leadership giving hope to your children, to your clan, to your family, to your organization, to your country, to our region? What priority are you giving to fostering hope as the key role of a leader? In closing, to you leaders who have gathered at this important Vakatabu Conference, may I invite you to perceive Pacific leadership as an everyday phenomenon. Through an everyday lens, leadership is about people. Through an everyday lens, leadership is about each one of us. villagers, students, youth, clan members, men, women, through an everyday lens. Everyday leadership is about each one of us in our different settings, being alive as living agents and dealing with the challenges and choices of our daily lives. Through an everyday perspective of leadership, everyday people like you and I use our hands, our heads, and our hearts together, and doing so in the everyday, whatever the spaces and seasons of our life journeys. And with this understanding of everyday leadership, I encourage you to reflect on the specific, particularly for those of us in this space right now, given the vision that PTC has been sharing with us, the specific task of preparing and mentoring our new generation leaders for tomorrow's journeys. And in recounting the gifts that Sarah in this story has given us, in summary, may I restate the questions for reflection and learning as Fiji and Pacific leaders of today. Firstly, how clear is your vision, your understanding of and commitment to everyday leadership? What implications does everyday leadership has for you, has for your family, your matangali, your organizations, or our wider country and region? Second, how well is yours a community of everyday leaders? How well is your everyday leadership a community of mind, a community of heart, and a community of practice, because we live out the best of what both our mind and our heart tell us? And thirdly, how well is your everyday leadership concurrently practiced, exercised together and in alignment, therefore attaining and sustaining your visions of tomorrow, your daily practice of today, your relationships, and your worship? Because as people, we worship, or we have to worship. And fourthly, how well is your everyday leadership collaborative and unifying, needful of and adaptive to, as well as confident in and trusting of each other? And fifthly, finally, how well is your everyday leadership morally pure? Or being from Malaita, I would rather use the word holy and compassionate, reflective and evident of hearts which are bled by the encounters we have with each other every day in our world. Hearts which are changed by and through the encounters that we have in our everyday leadership in daily life. And in closing, I encourage all of us as leaders to exercise faith. From the story of the paddle, we learned that it had sure faith in its maker. It had faith in the credibility of its ancestors who walked on water. And it had faith in its maker who designed it to be a paddle and to do what the paddle is made for. Thank you for your loloma.